Hello everybody, my name is Charlie and welcome back to the Eternal Watcher, where I love to talk about anything related to science fiction or fantasy. Today I'm going to be talking about Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, the third instalment in the Fantastic Beasts saga. Recently in the UK it dropped in cinemas and I was lucky enough to go and see it on Tuesday, so I definitely have a lot of fresh opinions ready to tell you all. Please do comment down below with your opinions on this film. It seems to be very divisive and polarising, so it will be very interesting to hear other people's opinions, especially on certain elements of the film, such as the new Grindelwald. Please do consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy my content. I've recently rebooted the channel, so we'll likely have a lot of new fans. Please do subscribe, I'd love to get some more support and maybe even hit 500 by the end of 2022. Without further ado, let's get into the video and I hope you enjoy. Since The Eternal Watcher as a channel is very new, you don't really know my opinions on the first two Fantastic Beasts films in this series, so here's a quick rundown of my opinions on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Firstly, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is an incredibly fun escape into the wizarding world. It's a very well crafted period piece set in 1920s New York, and it manages to introduce more wizarding lore and backstory without seeming overbearing or demanding of the audience. It manages to be part of a larger narrative, but remains very self-contained in Newt's adventure in returning his fantastic beasts to his suitcase. The CGI is also brilliant, and the four main characters in the form of Newt, Tina, Queenie and Jacob are incredibly likeable and consistently written. It's nothing epic or groundbreaking, but it's an extremely fun ride, and I'd give it a solid 8.5 to maybe 9 out of 10. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald now. I feel this one gets a lot of flack, but in my opinion it's still an overall enjoyable enough film. It's far from perfect and there's a lot more exposition-y lore that really does make me wonder why I should really care. A lot more characters to keep track of and a larger scope does seem to lose the charm slightly from the original, and Newt and the gang do seem more redundant here compared to the more epic tale of Dumbledore versus Grindelwald. However, the acting remains pretty excellent and the story is still structurally sound. The CGI looks great as well, but it does feel, a bit lacking in the charm that the original film had. I'd give this maybe a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. So I'm not going to be talking too much about the Johnny Depp controversy here. I'd rather keep the video more focused on the film itself. Now I've talked about my opinions on the previous two films, let's get into the main review. So firstly, onto the good in this review. Thankfully there is a lot more positives than negatives to say about this film. Firstly, I feel the main part about this film that makes it a lot better than The Crimes of Grindelwald is the shift and departure in tone from the first two films. The first two, they weren't exactly maybe as high quality as lots of the Harry Potter films, especially the later ones, which I thought were top-notch films. But they feel like Harry Potter films. They have the same general tone, the same general structure. This, however, was very different. This felt like a sort of political spy thriller, an espionage story inside the wizarding world, which I thought was really interesting. It gives the series a fresh feel, something different and something new. It makes it feel very vastly different to the very poorly received Crimes of Grindelwald, and I think that really does work in the film's favour. Obviously the story is set along the backdrop of 1930s Europe, up to, in the lead up to World War II. Lots of it is set in Germany. We've got the main central focus of the plot is the wizarding election, and Jude Law's Dumbledore basically assigning Newton and a group of people, including his brother, we've got Jacob in there, to basically stop it. And, stop his plans to become the ruler of the wizarding world and declaring war on the Muggles. So it feels very much like a mix of a spy espionage James Bond style story and a sort of political thriller. So that makes for something very new and very different. We haven't really seen anything like this before in the wizarding world, but it really does work. That the tone feels a bit more adult and a bit more mature. It doesn't feel like it's specifically aimed at children, whereas lots of the earlier Harry Potter films really were, compared to the later ones, which were a lot darker. So I feel that really works in its favour as well. Also, just generally the visuals, the cinematography, the CGI is very solid as well. It's nothing groundbreaking to say, it's nothing new or different, but it's good. The shots are all in focus. The CGI is great and very reflective of how far computer-generated imagery has come in the past, 21 years since the Philosopher's Stone. So it's very interesting to see, how far that has come. It's a very well made film. The set design, the music is all very, very solid. Very good direction from David Yates. I have absolutely no complaints there. And another great part was obviously the emotional core of this story. The main point of this story was to establish the rapport and the relationship between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, since they have a very intricate and more complex relationship than, for example, Harry Potter and Voldemort. That relationship in the Harry Potter films was Harry doesn't like Voldemort because he's evil. Harry kills Voldemort. That's what it is, but this is different because obviously Dumbledore and Grindelwald used to be in love and then fell apart as they had different ideologies, and then it ends up in them having a pretty awesome duel towards the end. I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But generally, it's a very well written and well acted relationship between the two of them. Although they don't share the screen all that much, the scenes they are in, notably the first scene when when they're having that dinner, and the scene towards the end where obviously they have that duel, it's very, very well acted and written. And honestly, I think Mads Mikkelsen is probably a better and more suitable actor for the role of Grindelwald than perhaps Johnny Depp was. As I said, I'm not really talking much about the Johnny Depp controversy. I don't really have a huge opinion on that. I just wanted to see a good Grindelwald. Not that Depp was bad, I enjoyed him in Crimes of Grindelwald, but I do feel Mads Mikkelsen is significantly better here. Now, obviously, the ending. I do have positives and negatives about the ending. On one hand, the duel between them is brilliant, very well acted, very well choreographed. It looks stunning, and I do like the whole plot element they've added with with the blood bond they have, which does explain why they didn't just duel in the previous one and why they're waiting so long for it. The main focus was of that duel was to break the blood bond, and then allow them to have proper, big, epic, larger scale fights in the 4th and 5th films of this series. So now on to the bad elements of this film. There aren't too many here, to be honest. I feel generally it's a very strong film, really. It's pretty good. I do certainly have my issues with it, though. So firstly, this film is 2.5 hours long. It's more than enough to tell a decent story with a couple, maybe a few, plot lines going through it. It doesn't need to be too simple, because it's 2.5 hours. It's Marvel and things like that have very much cemented the idea of 2.5 plus hour long films, and this has obviously continued that trend. But my main issue with the film is how it spends its time. There are a lot of very pointless, maybe somewhat enjoyable, but pointless, characters, plot threads, and scenes that don't really amount to anything. Firstly, we have Jessica Williams' character, Eulalie Hicks, who's another witch. All she really does is, add Jacob into the story without it seeming too artificial, even though it seems artificial anyway. What does she do? She doesn't really do anything. She's just sort of there so we have enough characters in the final scene where they obviously all have a briefcase and we don't know which one the Chillin's in. That's the main point of having so many characters. But for the most part, she's just kind of baggage, and she just takes up screen time and doesn't need to be there. I mean, the character's enjoyable enough. She has some nice moments, don't get me wrong, but does she need to be there, And we obviously have other things like Newt's brother Theseus. He gets captured at one point and Newt has to go and rescue him. That didn't need to happen, really. There are a lot of very pointless scenes that just seem to drag this out, and instead I feel those extra minutes that were kind of wasted. Oh, and Newt's assistant as well, Bunty, she doesn't really do much at all, but she just takes up screen time. That was really unnecessary. I feel it should have been given to more important plot lines that were set up in the previous film, The Crimes of Grindelwald, such as, obviously, who we once knew as Credence Barebone, played by Ezra Miller. Yes, Ezra Miller, he's got some controversy going on at the same time, but that didn't really affect the production, considering it was only a month or two ago. Anyway, his character is obviously now Aurelius Dumbledore. that's not really explored too much. He's just kind of there as Grindelwald's lackey, and I'm not really a huge fan of that. Like, he deserves to have his own character. He was the main villain of the first film as an Obscurus, and he was pretty prominent in the second film, as lots of it was finding out who he was. Now he barely has any screen time and just serves to do Grindelwald's dirty work, like capturing the Chillon from Newt at the start, and just being there in the battle towards the end. He doesn't really do much at all. He has the scenes in the mirror where he communicates with Dumbledore's brother and his father, Aberforth. Those are nice, but we don't understand why. What's going on? You know, it just feels like it's such an underdeveloped plot thread just to get down the runtime, when instead they should have cut the runtime from pointless baggage and instead raised this to a more important level of plotline, because there's not really much is going on here, and I wish it did, because it's an interesting concept. Yeah, same with Queenie as well. We have some scenes with Queenie, who's obviously turned to the dark side. The dark side is not Star Wars, but you know what I mean. Her and Jacob, they, she just ignores Jacob when they're at that dinner party earlier in the film, and they get married at the end. Like, what? What's going on? There's not nearly enough time devoted to Jacob and Queenie, or Credence, or Elias. I feel it's too focused on the whole plot with Newt and Theseus, and they need to realise, while it's interesting having the main character, Newt, as essentially a bystander in a larger story, they need to realise it's still not just about him. It's about other characters too, besides just him, Dumbledore and Grindelwald. It's about Credence, it's about Jacob, it's about Queenie. We even get some cameos from Tina, who I actually quite like. This is a bit of a positive here, but Tina, I didn't see her in any of the trailers, and I thought, is she going to be in this? I kind of enjoyed her character in the first couple of films, especially the first one. She was one of my favourites, but yeah, it's nice to see she got a cameo. I'm guessing the actress wasn't available because of scheduling conflict or something like that, but it was nice to see her as well. As to my negatives, I've rambled on enough about my pretty much is just a broad one negative, really. But for the most part, yeah, that's my negatives. They spent too much time on pointless plot threads when it should have been on previous plot threads. So overall, I'd say this is generally a very solid film. It has a nice emotional core, which is very well acted and written between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. In my opinion, a much better Grindelwald in the form of Mads Mikkelsen. I do prefer him to Johnny Depp quite a bit. And it's a very well made film. The shots are in focus, the CGI is great, the visuals, the cinematography. Generally, it's a well made film, and I do love the tone it has in the form of a political spy thriller set in the Wizarding world. However, I do feel, in terms of my complaints of the film, that it does spend a bit too much time on pointless plot threads when it should have been more about the plot threads established in the previous film, rather than trying to deny Crimes of Grindelwald ever existed, which I don't think is the way to go. You might as well admit that it exists, even if not that many people liked it. At the end of the day, though, while the original probably would get an 85 out of 100, and Crimes of Grindelwald would get like a 71, this would sit comfortably at like an 83, 84. I think it's much better than Crimes of Grindelwald, but just shy of the original film. I still feel it does lack a bit of the charm that the original film had. Again, please do comment below with your opinions on this film. I'd love to hear what you thought of it. And again, like and subscribe if you enjoy my content and you're a fan of anything related to science fiction or fantasy. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and goodbye.